On behalf of the family of Sandy Kaplan, I welcome you and I thank you for your sharing this sacred remembrance of Sandy with them. Death has taken our beloved Sandy. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there's loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, be with them. For Sandy's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks. Those who wish may join me in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what has been planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. And now it's my pleasure to call upon Sandy's daughter, Dana, to say a few words.
I wanted to go first so I could go before I started crying, but it's too late for that. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being here. I have to speak for my grandmother because she can't be here for her son, but she's here in her heart for sure. She's in the hospital, and she's actually doing really, really well right now. So when I took her in on Friday, I thought to myself, well, maybe she just wants to be there for her son because we knew it was coming soon. And I had some comfort in that. And then she was great. And I said to my dad, I said, you can't take her yet. I'll give her to you soon, but you can't take her yet because I need her. And I think my dad's always known that. But my grandma just said this morning when I talked to her, just speak from my heart. And so my grandma always talked about my dad that he was a fighter. He was a fighter from day one when he was born. If penicillin had not been invented, he wouldn't be here. So he kind of fought life and death from the day he was born. And she also always said that my dad, whatever he put his mind to, he just threw himself into it. And I got to see that growing up too. Whatever my dad, whatever interest he had, there was no like halfway. It was, we did it and we did it 120%. And he was brilliant. My grandma always said he was such a brilliant man. And he was, like he could build bicycles from nothing, from parts. And I remember a memory growing up, and I was telling my daughter about this the other night because she never knew Grandpa Sandy before his heart attack. And so she likes to hear stories about him. And I said, well, Grandpa used to work on bikes in the basement every weekend. And every weekend I'd go down and he'd be drinking a can of Genesee in the can. And I said, Grandpa, Dad, can I have a sip of that? Sure. I'd take it. Ew, this is disgusting. Next weekend, hey, Dad, can I have a sip of that? Sure. And I would have it, and I would hate it every weekend. And I think my dad just figured he was keeping me from drinking beer for a long time, and he did, which was good. So that was kind of a funny thing. But my dad was brilliant with bicycles. He used to go on 100-mile weekend bicycles. And I know that he's up there riding 100-mile trails in heaven right now because he missed that so much. He took me roller skating every single weekend, every Saturday. That was like our date. We went to Roller Palace at Golden Gate, and I will remember that forever. It was like our daddy-daughter date. It was awesome. He took us camping. I won't ever camp anymore. It's like bugs and dirt, but I remember as a kid, I loved it. And I slept on the ground, and I still don't, Kathy, I don't think I like the bugs or the dirt or anything like that, but he would cook over a campfire with us and everything. It was awesome. He was brilliant with computers. I remember him having the very first Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 3, first one to get on the internet. I had email when I was like 8. It was awesome. No one else knew what that was. He came to our school and he put together a whole orchestra program with his computer, and all my friends thought he was just awesome because this computer was creating music. He wrote games for us. Now it's nothing. We've got tablets that do math and everything, and my dad was creating that for my brother and I just from when we were kids, before that was ever even thought of by anybody else. The grieving for my dad started 10 years ago because that's the day that I lost the dad I grew up with. But the last 10 years, he has shown love more than anything else, and I think more than anything, he's just been accepting of the life that he has, that my amazing stepmother, Kathy, has been able to give him, so that he's had 10 years to see all his grandchildren be born, and he never would have been able to do that without her, taking care of him and loving him, and knowing exactly what to do because of her nurse background. And my grandma says all the time, Kathy has a golden halo, and she does, and she loved him. It's a love that I hope every person in this room gets to experience, because it's the most selfless love I've ever seen in my life, and I thank you for that so much, for giving my dad 10 years that he should never have had, that God gave him, I think, because of you. Because you weren't ready to let go, and we weren't ready to let go. I love you too. Yep. And so my daughters could know Grandpa Sandy, and my brother's daughters, they're younger, but they could meet Grandpa Sandy and know who they were. So I will leave you with what I told my grandma last night. We laughed. Grandpa's up there, his brother's up there, his dad's up there, his uncle's up there, And his mother-in-law is up there, and they are all playing cards and smoking and drinking. And the reason they're doing that is because the women haven't gotten there yet, because we're still hanging on to them. My grandma and my Aunt Lois, when it's your turn, you're going to bust up the party. So let them party for a while, because they're having a great old time up there. Thank you.
David, Sandy's son, gave me some remarks to read. Dear family and friends, although I may not have the strength to personally share these thoughts and memories with you all, I still felt that they needed to be shared, so I'm having them read to you all today. My dad was an amazing dad, plain and simple. Growing up with him was always a good time. As a kid, I enjoyed watching him cook, and as you all know, he was fantastic at it. Recipes that stick out in my mind the most are his spaghetti sauce and his macaroni and cheese, which I even make for my little girl Jillian on occasion. Aside from being a great cook, he was incredibly hard-working. I remember as a kid going with him to both IBM and Progressive on Take Your Child to Work Day, and I got to experience everything he did on a daily basis with computers. I also got to see all his fellow employees enjoy being around him, and I decided as a kid that I would strive to be like that someday when I entered the workforce. My grandma always says that if you have a job that you love and they love you back, it's not work, it's pleasure. My dad definitely was the embodiment of this statement. A particularly fond memory from childhood is when he and Kathy took my sister and I camping to Jellystone Park. To say that this was roughing it, like traditional camping, is a bit of a stretch. This place had everything: a swimming pool, an arts and crafts barns, cartoons shown on a big outdoor screen at night, and of course breakfast with Yogi Bear. I remember my dad making his amazing spaghetti sauce and serving it for dinner at a picnic table and sleeping in tents overnight. We always had a great time, and I even think that I may take my own kids there someday when they're a little older. When I turned 16, both my parents offered to give me driving lessons. My mom was a nervous wreck. I recall well the sweating, the panicking, the constant yelling of things like, hit the brakes and keep your eyes on the road. My dad had a slightly different approach to teach his son to drive. He would put his seat all the way back and relax in a lying down position, completely unable to see the road. He would tell me, just drive and don't crash the car. Let me know if you have any questions. And that's exactly what I did. I think his thought was to himself, I'd rather not see the catastrophe about to happen here and just hope for the best. Luckily, I never got in any accidents while driving with him, and while I'm not sure I'll adopt the same tactic when teaching my own kids to drive, I appreciate him having enough trust in me. Some of my best memories of my dad are times when we would joke around. My dad always had a great sense of humor. One memory in particular that has always stood out to me is the last time he asked me to hit his hand as hard as I possibly could. I think I was about 15 at the time. I was over at the house, and for some odd reason, my dad stuck out his hand in an open palm and said to me, "Hey, David, go ahead. Hit my hand as hard as you can." I looked at him like he was crazy, but he kept egging me on to do so. So I wound my arm back and took the biggest swing with my own palm as hard and as fast as I could. We connected with a thunderous slap, and we both screamed out in shock and pain. Our hands were burning for at least a half hour. He looked at me immediately, regretting his decision to have his 15-year-old son perform this feat of strength. We both laughed for a long time about that moment, and needless to say, there were no further episodes of hand slapping. My dad's sense of humor was one that was always present, no matter the circumstances of the situation at hand. He could be funny at times when you think he'd be serious. When he had his heart attack in 2007, he was intubated for about a week. It was during this week that I also got called to serve jury duty in Cleveland. One day I went up to visit him by myself, and the nurse told me that she thought she saw him awakening and that I should try to talk to him. Sure enough, when I went to his bedside, I saw him awake and he was able to talk with a hoarse voice. I said to him in a joking manner, "Dad, I'm so glad to see you up. I just came from jury duty and the judge dismissed me so early that I can come and see you." The first words out of his mouth was, "Oh, I hate jury duty. I had to do that once. It was terrible." Here we were, embracing the moment when I realized that my dad might make it through this ordeal, and we're sitting there talking about jury duty. What was even more amazing about the story was that I went downstairs to tell Kathy that he was awake, and I just talked to him, and she looked at me in shock because she had been with him all day, and he hadn't said a word. We went back upstairs to see him again, but he decided to sleep a bit longer, and I even think it was another whole day before he spoke again. So my dad takes one moment of lucidity after a weekend ordeal and decides to wake up and spend his time talking about jury duty. But that was my dad. Aside from this funny story about jury duty, I will never, ever forget what my dad said to us when he was finally awake fully. This is one of those stories that makes you question everything you've ever known, everything you ever believed in life, and I'll never forgotten it. My sister had recently given birth to my niece, Simone, my dad's first granddaughter, a few months before his time in the hospital. Kathy had put up a bunch of pictures of Simone in the hospital room to encourage my dad to get better and, of course, allow him to see her since she couldn't visit in the ICU. There was one day when he just said out loud, "Where are my other 3 granddaughters?" Kathy looked at him and said, "Honey, you have only one granddaughter, and her name is Simone." My dad was shocked and said, "What? I have 4. When I heard this story at this time, I had assumed that it was because Simone was changing so much, and babies quickly do in short times, and the variety of pictures made him think that there were other granddaughters in the picture. Not to mention he had just been through a very hard time and was still adjusting mentally. I haven't given much thought to this story, but the one thing that always stayed in my mind during that time was how unfair it was. We didn't yet know if he was going to survive this ordeal or not, given the severity of the situation. I was upset that he might not be there to see me get married someday, as I had not yet even my future wife at that time. I was upset that he might not get to meet my kids in the future and get to play with his grandkids. All I could think about to myself was how could this possibly be happening, and why is this happening to such a good person? I couldn't imagine my dad not being around to see these important milestones in our lives, and I was heartbroken at the time that it might end up being a reality. All of us sitting here know, of course, that this was not a reality. My dad defied the odds and the doctors and survived. 2 years later, Dana welcomed granddaughter number 2, Genevieve, into the family, and my dad couldn't be happier. He loved spending time with his little girls. I thought back to the time in the hospital when he thought he had 4 granddaughters, and I said, "Okay, Dad, you got 2, but I think it's just luck." Meanwhile, I was busy trying to find Mrs. Right, and sure enough found her in my wife, Jenny. We married in 2011, and I'm happy to say that my dad was right up there under the chuppah with us to celebrate. 3 years later, we had announced our first pregnancy, and Jenny, along with the rest of her family, was 100% convinced it was going to be a boy. I thought back to the time my dad announced that he had 4 granddaughters. I decided instead that we were in fact going to have a girl. Sure enough, little Jillian was born, and I was so thrilled that my dad was still there to meet her and enjoy her. See, now that there were 3 granddaughters in the family, I started thinking, okay, this is getting a little weird. A week before my dad's 69th birthday, Jenny and I welcomed granddaughter number 4, little Lydia, into the family. There was never a question in my mind that she was going to be a girl. The moment she was born was a moment that changed me forever, and not just in the way that any child's birth changes a person. It changed me because I now thought that somehow my dad truly knew. I think now that what kept him going through the entire ordeal was that he had been shown the life that he was going to have, and he had made up his mind that he was going to live it. You hear stories about people having experiences they cannot explain. That seems supernatural or beyond our realm of understanding. Whatever you or I believe about what happened that day 10 years ago, I believe that it was my dad's heart that actually saved his life, even though it had physically been hurt. I believe that the strength of his love for us and what got him to overcome the odds, because no medical condition could ever reduce his capacity to love. It proved to me that the physical condition of a person can never change who they are on the inside, even if there limits what they are able to do on the outside. My dad was always the same dad for his entire life, even to the end. I even more convinced as well that while he may no longer be with us physically, he is certain here with our hearts and forever in our hearts. And now I'm going to call upon his sister-in-law, Mary Beth.
My sister, she's sister-in-law.
Sanford's sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law, Sanford, right.
My dear brother-in-law, Sandy. Sandy was one of the sweetest, most generous, loving persons I've ever known. In these recent years since his heart attack, he was always so pleased if you came to visit and just had a simple chat for a few moments, and he would always ask me how I'm doing and what's going on in my life. And he was always sitting in the living room reading. He was self-taught in so many areas, and in everything he excelled. He read all the classics. He knew classical music, and he was always ready to use those skills to help anyone else. When Sandy was younger and worked downtown, for many years he never ate lunch. Instead, he volunteered at a soup kitchen in a nearby church. He did this every day, all those years. I always thought that he and Kathy were like a perfect team, caring so much about others and always ready to help. In the late 90s, Sandy and Kathy were worried, with really good reason, that I was going to be left behind as progress in technology began to boom and personal computers became common. They were absolutely right. Sandy and Kathy pushed me to learn to use the computer. They repaired my computer countless times. I could always call for help, and Sandy would stop by for repairs and checkups, even after a long day at work. I'm so grateful. But I'm especially touched by the love and kindness always undergirding these phone calls, questions, and visits. No question was too stupid to be answered. That spirit of giving and generosity and their love for each other has certainly been the foundation of Sandy and Kathy's lives. They have always been there for each other, and they have always been there for anyone else in need. I say, Sandy, thank you for all the love you've shared. You will be deeply missed and very, very lovingly remembered.
And now it's my honor to call upon Sandy's wife, Kathleen, or as most of you know her, Kathy.
These beautiful eulogies, what can I say? What a loving family. Sandy absolutely adored his children and his precious grandchildren and loved Jenny and Bob. And I'm just, what can I say? I just want to say that because a lot of my material has already been taken. But I will say, so I'll just give a line or two. Sandy was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he came kicking and screaming to Ohio at the age of 3 months. He was always just a brilliant boy, and just like David said, his grandmother told me so many times how things came so easily to him. He was a quick study. He didn't have a lot of friends in school. He was shy, and he described himself as somewhat of a misfit. He said he had buck teeth when he, like, around the age of 9 or 10. He was self-conscious about his fiery red hair and glasses. And that's too bad. That's just one of those unfair things in life that happen. But it didn't stop him, and he was always just a gentle, loving spirit, and he did have some good friends. He joined a band. He was very involved in music and chorus when he went to Heights High, where he graduated from in '65. And he had joined Attila and the Huns. He was a Hun, and I can attest to that. He was a Hun. Yeah. His interest in music, different genres, was pretty interesting in itself. He loved light classical music, probably most of all, Mozart being his absolute favorite. But he enjoyed country music, which was like astounding, and he enjoyed opera. He could just listen to opera singers, and I was absolutely amazed. That was, besides being an avid reader, his love of music and opera and the classical music, it was just so soothing for him. As far as his cooking, now he told me when we met that he really didn't cook, but just as you've heard already, when Sandy takes up an avocation or a sport, he gives it his all. I owned about 3 cookbooks when I came to this marriage. When Sandy took up cooking, that burgeoned to about 2 bookcases full. We have, every time we would go somewhere, it'd be like, well, that's a nice cookbook, a little memento of the trip. It just got to the point where, like, you possibly could not use these cookbooks. And then with the advent of the computer age, now we had 2 million cookbooks. No, I exaggerate. But we would go to the internet to look up recipes, which that made no sense. But, that was just one of those things also. We loved bookstores. One of his funny stories, we used to go to Borders bookstore on a Friday night. And one night some gentleman came in that was apparently enjoying a few beers. And we're all quietly reading in this pit area. And this guy's like, doesn't anybody go out drinking anymore? Have some fun? And that just absolutely cracked him up. He just loved it. It was just funny, It was kind of cool. And yeah, Sandy enjoyed a beer. And he did do those bike rides, lengthy bike rides. He could do 100 miles in a day. I did join him on the Western Reserve Wheelers tour along the south shore of Lake Erie. I only did it once. Once was enough. But that generous man, by the time I made it from Cleveland to Sandusky, and normally I don't get sore from bicycle seats or anything, but I really was, and I was dreading the trip back. And of course, he insisted on trading seats. He took off his Spanko seat and gave that to me. You know, most of the time he's standing up pedaling anyway. I don't think he was really using it as much as I was using it. But I mean, his acts of generosity were always like that. I mean, to me and to anyone, just as you heard. If somebody said, gee, I like your iPod, or gee, I like this, he would say, do you want it? You know? I mean, that's who he was. And he also loved astronomy. He was ready to sign up for the first trip to the moon if there were any takers, but I assured him that I was not going to sit by quietly and allow that to happen. Other hobbies, okay. I don't think he was at risk. And yes, he did participate at St. John's Cathedral Soup Kitchen. He also, later on, the Spearings, Judy Spearing, got him involved in St. Timothy's Church. They had an outreach once a month where they fed whoever was in need. So we all kind of helped with that, but he was the one that really got that started. And he was a member of, I don't know if it was RailNet, but he had that Tandy Radio Shack 80. And he loved creating those little software programs like David was saying. He absolutely could do this for hours, create little simple programs and then have me watch how they ran. And he was a blast. My sister Mary Beth, she teaches, and music, that's her area. And her students needed these name cards or name tags. But anyway, he created them in a program called Fantasy, which was probably all of 35 kilobytes on this Tandy Radio Shack computer, okay? And he printed them out on a dot matrix printer. She had him visit her class one time, and the whole class had made thank you cards for him, and he brought home this envelope just full of these, and he was so touched. But that he did. He loved it. He also did remote desktop support to family members in the early 90s. You know, now you pay for that sort of thing online. You can go on and they'll take control of your computer and do all that for you. But he did it way back then. I mean, he was really ahead of the pack with that high tech. He absolutely loved technology. And he taught me, I'm an artist, and I have to say that it was new to me, vector illustration. I really hadn't done vector graphics or anything. And he had a program called Arts and Letters. He used to do some of the flyers for the IBM Club. And he introduced me to Arts and Letters and helped me, and that was kind of a precursor to Adobe Illustrator, that particular suite. I'm not going to go into all of this. He ran the Eisen Center. He loved IBM. He loved his friends there. His bosses really liked him. And I think the thing about Sandy is that his bosses enjoyed just having him stop in and chat with them. He was frank. He was candid. As my brother John would say, he was candid without being offensive. You knew where he stood. You didn't have to guess. Sandy told you. And they trusted him for his honesty and forthrightness. I think my sister also covered about the volumes. He read the complete volumes of Shakespeare, Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, Sherlock Holmes. He read the entire Bible from cover to cover at least twice. He might have been working on his third time. He also read the MS-DOS manual. I would say, well, it was this thick. It was this thick, okay? And this is for entertainment before I'd go to bed, right? Yeah, I'm just going to lay in bed and read this DOS manual. I'm like, okay then. He was, well, not most nights, but it happened. He was trilingual, English, Hebrew, and German. And he played piano. He didn't take lessons very long. I think he wished he had persevered, but it came quickly to him, and he played with passion. He also enjoyed a little playing on the guitar. Food was one of his great passions. And although he couldn't really eat the way he wanted to during these last 10 years, we had some nice meals out. And he supplemented that with the Food Channel. I think he would have loved Guy Fieri's job if he could have gotten it. Sandy was never happier than when he embraced that new phase of grandparenthood. and we already heard all the grandchildren, and I just had the dates and everything. He did have a thirst for knowledge. He did not have formal education. He majored in chess and pinochle at Kent State. And I would say that that did not bother him. And the thing about, he was a gentle giant of a man. He knew who he was. He was just confident. He had no insecurity. He did not care what other people thought of him. Just didn't bother him. Didn't have to prove anything to anybody. He received sterling reviews both at IBM and Progressive. I've read some of those reviews, and I'm telling you, they just touched me. He was a mentor to so many people. One thing that he liked doing, he had a little bit of OCD, so this kind of goes along with it, but when he was at IBM, he was in accounts receivable, accounts payable. He was using a 10 key at that point. And they had the need for him to fly around the country occasionally because they would have branch offices that could not reconcile their bank statement of $360 million a year, right? He would fly around and he would reconcile their statements to the penny. And he got a big kick out of that. He goes, I could write that off. He goes, but I wanted to find it. I was like, I'm serious. A penny? Okay. But, that's a wonderful thing. And that's exactly the type of man he was when it came to problem solving, figuring out something on the computer, doing something. He had a tenacity that was ferocious, and he had an energy level that would not quit. Anybody with less energy than this man, who functioned on anywhere between 10 and 20% only had that much use of his heart the entire last 10 years, and there were times it was less than that. I mean, if you didn't have that tremendous energy starting out, if they didn't have it, there's no way they would have endured what he went through. The complications as a result of low blood flow to certain organs affected, he just had a lot of complications. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to say I do thank all of you for coming out today, and we love you and appreciate you so much. You were so loved. I think that you know that. And, Sandy actually death tapped on his door a number of times, but he didn't answer it. He just ignored it. But this time, heaven was insistent. All I can figure is that someone up there needed technical assistance in the cloud. So that's my only explanation. And he did have a poem that he calligraphed for me, or had calligraphed for me, and he knew it by heart anyway. And it was, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death.
In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember Sandy. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, in the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, in the beginning of the year when it ends, we will remember Sandy. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember Sandy. So as long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. Early or late, all must answer the summons to return to the source of being. For when we lose our hold on life when our time has come, As a leaf falls from the branch when the day is done, the deeds of the righteous enrich us all, as the fallen leaf enriches the earth. The dust returns to the earth, the spirit lives on with God. Like the stars by day, our beloved dead are not seen by mortal eyes. They shine on forever. Theirs is eternal peace. Let us be thankful for the companionship that continues in a love stronger than death. Sanctifying the name of God, we honor the memory of Sandy Kaplan. Please rise for the memorial prayers. El Malay Rachamim Shochem Brabomim. Amsei Minucha Nachataha Kamfe Hashkina Im Kudoshim Rorim Kazar Harakia Misarim Es Nishmas Sanford F. Kaplan Shalach Le'olamo Bial Harachamim Yastarehu B'Sefer Kanafo Le'olamim Vayisror B'Sor HaChaim Es Nishmato Alanoi Hu Nachalato V'Yanuach B'Shalom Amish Kavav V'Damar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Sanford F. Kaplan, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. And now those who wish may recite with me the mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah. B'alma divrach irusei v'amlich malchusei. B'chayechol nevyomechol nevchaye dechol beis Yisrael. B'agalav izman kori v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam ulamei amaya. Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispoar v'yisramam v'yisnaseh. V'yisadar v'yisalev v'yisalal shemei dekudashah barichu. V'yela mimchal berchasa v'shirasa. Tush b'chasa v'nechamasa. Damiram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mamah, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Lake ki shalach Adonai, go your way, for God has called you, Sandy. Lake v'Adonai ye'imecha, go your way, may God be with you. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God receive you, and grant you that everlasting peace. Sandy is survived by his wife Kathleen, daughter Dana, husband Robert, son David, wife Jennifer, 4 beautiful granddaughters, Simone, Genevieve, Jillian, Lydia, his aunt Lois Levine, his mother, and many nieces, nephew, brother-in-laws, and cousins. The family, again, thanks you for coming today and sharing this time with them. They will be receiving friends immediately following the service at the residence of Jennifer and David Kaplan, 1994 Winchester Road, Lyndhurst, Ohio, today until 8 p.m. And as we heard in the words spoken about Sandy, the soup kitchen and sharing meals with the needy, anyone who wishes to honor his memory may contribute to the Cleveland Food Bank. Again, thank you for attending this service. As our coming here was to find peace, so too may our going in peace. Amen.